usually have my music.
No, I heard it last week.
Oh yeah, good deal,
Yeah,
good deal. Good
yeah.
evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Ajul, and you are joining us on DeeMaine Reality podcast, all about life, everything that happens, good, the bad. What's really going on, what's really affecting us. So tonight we have a very special guest, Junius, with us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm chilling. I'm chilling
Chilling, chilling, always.
all the time. All the time.
So go ahead and tell our guests a little bit about yourself, like what you do, like what you're into. I know that you're setting a podcast yourself up, so let us know what's going
Right,
on with you guys.
right. Well, my name's Junius. I have actually been doing a lot of stuff. I've been working with one of my friends, James. We've been working. He has Cavic Sense. It's a production company, and so he's been producing some new content. He does podcasts. He does. I write for him actually. Um,
Some
so I've been doing some sports columns, life columns. So been doing with him, been rocking with him for oof,
quite some time.
15 years now.
Oh my,
Yeah. We've known each other for 15. But just in terms of just the writing for him aspect has been like the last 4 years.
oh awesome. That's
Yeah,
a cool deal though.
it
Um,
is.
are you
It
still
is.
like a San Antonio fan?
Oh yeah, I'm from San
Oh,
Antonio. I'm from San like it's Spurs all day.
Spurs all day. I don't think they're gonna get to
Spurs
play
all
this
day.
season. What do you think?
They're actually, I'm glad you said that. They're actually having a conference call now,
Are they?
like while we're speaking. They're having a conference call
Wow.
with
That's
all the
interesting.
players.
Maybe they'll play ball like the UFC fought with nobody there.
Well, they're talking about they're gonna cut, I think it's something like I forgot how much it is. It's like 1/70th or something of each player's salary,
Wow.
because what they're gonna do is they're gonna use that money to compensate for not having fans.
Oh, goodness
So
gracious. You and I are going to have a sports talk later because I was very appalled by the report that came out about the Kobe Bryant accident, the helicopter company. But that's a completely different subject.
yeah,
We'll save a whole
yeah.
podcast for sports.
Yes,
Um,
thank you. I appreciate it.
so tonight we're actually going to talk about something a little more on the serious side. So anybody joining in, just to let you know, this is going to be a topic that is sensitive to some people. Everybody does have their opinions, and as always on my show, I open the door to every opinion. If it's a negative opinion that you have, I ask that you just kind of tame it down. But we're not just going to go at each other. So but all comments are welcome. So with that said, what we're going to be talking about is the Ahmaud Arbery case. And if you haven't heard about that case, Mr. Arbery was a 25-year-old man out for a jog in a neighborhood, a white neighborhood, predominantly white, let me say it that way, neighborhood in Georgia in February 23rd, and he was shot down and killed by a father and son. Now, no arrest. There's been a lot of mistakes. It looks like in the case, a lot of cover up because the dad was a good old boy cop, um, just retired in 2019. And 74 days later, there finally was an arrest in the case. So this brings up a lot of talk about racism again. It brings up a lot of talk about the good old boys with the cops and things to that effect. So what is your view on that case when you think about it?
um, as a black man, we I've written this. This is going to be actually one of my next topics that I'm gonna write about next time I write on Cavic Sense. It's it's a it's a topic that I think, sadly, is going to continue. Obviously, but also as a I think I've shared this on Facebook a couple times. I've put it as my status. I feel like as black men, we're an endangered species.
Yeah.
I feel like we are hunted down much like animals. I've heard a lot of times whenever myself or anybody speaks on police brutality, um, especially somebody like a Colin Kaepernick who uh, does it quietly and he does it respectfully, and he even explains his position. We still get a lot of vitriol our way.
Yeah.
I feel like there's nothing to that. I feel like there's no way for us to protest. I feel like there's nothing for us to do to stem the tide. A lot of other Black people feel that, whoa, okay, well, why don't we where's the action? We talk about it every single time it happens. Why aren't we out there doing more? And the reality of the situation is there are plenty of people doing things about it. There's, the NAACP, there's a different national association for, like the Black Caucus, there's Black journalists, there's people, putting money towards it, and the Urban League, and just multiple people. But the reality is you're trying to stop something that is systemic. You with I hear, and this is where it gets dicey, is that a lot of times there are certain uh, people, and it's not, and I can't really limit it to just white people because I've heard it from everybody, from all different races. But there are people that believe that slavery is just one of those things where it ended 1865. It was the Emancipation Proclamation, and it's done. Well, I remember reading somewhere that to have a full-fledged society that is removed and able to stand on its own, it has to be at least 200 years of that society. Well, that was 1865. We're in 2020. So we're only 155 years out from the Emancipation Proclamation, which means, and then as Blacks, we haven't fully been able to gather our identity and get a power base, whether it's in economics, whether it's in health, whether it's in finance, wherever it is, we haven't fully gotten our power base together. Well, why have you not gotten that power base? Well, you haven't gotten that power base because of, look at the reality of what has happened. When you free somebody from something as horrific as slavery, what do you do next? You have nothing. So what was the first thing that a lot of Blacks did? A lot of Blacks became indentured servants. When you become an indentured servant, you still owe somebody something. You're still helping them. You're still making sure that everything's good for them, but you're not building anything. You come through time, you leave indentured servitude, you get to a chance to where you have Black Wall Street in Tulsa, or you have 1920s Harlem, or you have any of these places where Black people are thriving. Well, what happens? In Tulsa in 1921, they destroyed Black Wall Street, killed over something like 400 Blacks, and just destroyed it in Greenwood, Oklahoma. And then you have Harlem. Well, Harlem, over time, Harlem gets, anything is happening. You get police harassing, you get lynching, you get whatever it may be. So that comes through. Then you get Jim Crow. So now you have basically the South is on fire. You have the South, you have all these racist practices in the South. I said, and then so that's half of your country now is under siege. And you have that last however long. You have riots, you just have unfair lending practices, you have people getting hanged, you have Black kids that cannot go and attend school with whites. And then the schools that you do have for them are horrible with either too many kids in the classroom, or they don't have the right books, or the books are torn, or whatever it is. So they're not getting knowledge. So you have that going. By the time you get to the 80s, I was born in the 80s. I was born during the crack era. Crack era comes. Well, what happens to us as a community? Well, let me go back for a minute. You have all of our civil rights leaders that get assassinated. You get Malcolm, you get Martin, you get Fred Hampton, you get just so many people, or you get the Black Panthers folding. You have that, and then you transition into the crack era. The crack era now happens, and the ghettos are flooded with crack, and the ghettos are mostly where Black and brown people are living. So now all of a sudden it's our community now has that going. So and the crack epidemic were in the crack era, it worked two ways. It worked with, now you have not only us using it, but you also have Black men that cannot get jobs. And so what they do is they sell crack. And so now it provides for them and their families.
Yeah.
And so you have that double-edged sword. You have us killing our own people by our hands.
Yeah.
And then
they're being forced to essentially hustle.
You are
they're
because
being forced into that position.
you were forced into that position, and you have to start thinking once again the same thing. Well, you say, well, why is that your method, or why do you feel that that's your opportunity to move out of things? Well, because education is limited. You're talking at a time, you're saying, well, it's expensive to attend college. It was expensive back then. I mean, it's really expensive now, but it's expensive back then. And you're saying to just attend college, and you're talking about you didn't get the education you should have gotten in the inner city, and now you want to go try to attend college. And so, what is the opportunity for you to make it and for y'all to have a decent life? Because at the same time, once you attend college, it's not a definite that you get a job. But another thing is, where else are you going to make money that's going to, at that time with the economy, where else are you going to make money that you're going to be able to sustain a family? Well, you're going to be making it selling drugs. So that's what happens. I said, and all this, you say, and people say, well, how does all this relate to what happened back then? Well, if you look at all of that happening, all of that is a racism problem, but it's a classism problem. Ahmaud Arbery, it was classism, because now the issue comes with him is that he was living in a white area.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some white people that everybody knows that feels like, well, you shouldn't be here. I have the right to, whenever I want to, not respecting him as a man, not respecting him as a human being, says, well, I have the right to see what he is doing. I have the right to know what he is up to. And so what do? Well, I'm going to go over and harass them and accost him. And if he has some sort of reaction to me, if he has some sort of pushback, then I'm going to put him in his place. Well, what's the difference between doing that and then what was happening during the civil rights movement?
Yeah.
That's essentially what happened in Selma. In Selma, when they marched across the bridge, Dr. King and Andrew Young, and they're coming over that bridge. What was it? It was a peaceful protest. It is them coming across. It is them coming across and saying, "Look, the South is in bad shape here. The South is terrible. The South is for Black and brown people, it is subduing them. And you're telling me, so what we're going to do is we're going to march. We're going to raise awareness. We're going to say this is not okay." So what did the police do? The police shoot them. The police put dogs on them. And it's because I have to show you your place, And so we saw it with Colin Kaepernick as well. The NFL had to show Colin Kaepernick his place. As much as I love sports, I was, and I remember at the time I was saying that, for me, when it comes to matters like that, I feel like it's you have white owners, and they don't understand the struggle of being a black man, and they don't understand where a lot of us come from. And so what happens is they come in, and so their world is completely different. And so what happens is they see you as the work for hire. And so they don't understand that your life and your experiences, no matter how much money you make, how much power you have, what's your status, that you are a black man every day. And this is what you have to live with. And so as a black man, I'm seeing my own color get abused. And so Kaepernick spoke to that very reality. And he was just saying, look, let me go against this flag represents a country that I may love, but doesn't love me.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and so it's the same thing with Ahmaud Arbery, Mr. Arbery. It's like, well, these people felt that I am above you. I have to put you in your place.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was fatal.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was fatal, and I think that you are correct. I mean, we as a society, and I don't know if it's some people might have a fear of what can happen if you praise and put a black man where they should be.
Right.
There should be no divide. Truthfully, there should be no divide. I don't, you know me, I'm very fluid. I don't think there should ever be. However, my view is not the same as some older people here in the South. And that is very evident. Living in the South growing up, I would hate to say, admit, but I grew up with family members, neighbors that were very racist in their speech, and they didn't think twice about it because that was the way they were raised.
Right.
And so you look at a gentleman and his son that are in their 40s and 60s, they're in that era. They're still in that mindset where to them, one black man is the same as all of them. So, there's just, to me, looking at that, I feel like they saw him and just placed everything else that had happened to them. Like the son's car had been broken into, or they'd seen some black men around the neighborhood that had gone into that house previously. It wasn't Ahmaud, but they placed those transgressions of those other gentlemen onto him. And what gets me is the cover up. I mean, this young man was out for a jog. He didn't live in the neighborhood, lived in a neighborhood next to it. His mother did.
Right.
And so he's out for a daily jog. His family said he loved to work out. He was a football star. He'd gotten accepted to Georgia Tech technical school. So he went to college.
Right.
He had some transgressions in the past. And that plays into a lot of it too, because come to find out, the father had actually helped in prosecuting him previously. So in your mind, you're like, well, is he thinking, does he realize who that is? Is he angry that he's out? And then come to find out they really lump in when you're looking at all these prosecutors that recuse themselves and the reasons for it, they really start bringing that stuff up. And you're like, why are you placing all these transgressions on this one gentleman who was doing nothing wrong? And looking at the state law and, the Georgia law, he really was doing nothing wrong. And they use the aspect of citizen's arrest. Well, first of all, let me see here. The exact definition of a citizen's arrest in Georgia is very specific. It says that a private person may arrest an offender if they see the act happening. It has to be a felony, and they have to see it and know that it's a felony, and they have to think the offender is escaping or attempting to escape. Then they can hold him till a law officer gets there. Well, first of all, they didn't see it. There's no way they could have seen it. And second of all, if you watch the video, which I've chosen not to show the video because I think it's been shown, a lot. If you haven't seen it, I will say to you, Google it on YouTube and you will see a very horrific event. But that was an ambush. and they waited for him. So
Right.
he wasn't fleeing from them. So just based upon their whole definition of, citizen's arrest, right there, they're out of line, completely out of line. And, reading through the police reports, I mean, it's one lie after another, and it's just cover up after cover up, like good old boys. And I don't know if you've seen the movie 16 Shots.
Yes.
It's a great documentary.
Right.
I highly recommend it. It talks about the 2014 shooting. His name was Laquan. 16 times they shot that man and then tried to cover it up. And this kind of seems like the same aspect of it. So is it a color issue, or is it a cop issue? Because George McMichael was a former cop. So where is it a cop cover up, or is it a color issue on the fact of it not being charged?
Well, as you heard earlier, I like to preface everything with background and history for people that may not know. The early start of police or cops was the slave catchers.
Yeah.
That's how it started. So as it progressed through the years, that's what it is. So it was to when as it developed through the years. So you're going from, okay, you're catching slaves till you're punishing black people and black and brown people, and through the years. And then you get to a point where you were able to have something like the FBI. Everybody talks about J. Edgar Hoover. And the FBI's original start was the FBI only hired young white educated males. And they didn't even investigate crimes like that. They were more just intelligence. What happened was, over time, as you had the civil rights movement, as you had that going on, J. Edgar Hoover switched the focus of the FBI. So now it becomes, let's look and try to dismantle and decimate any black uprising. Okay, so then so if you're at the top level and this is what you're doing, well, you can imagine how it trickles down. So that's one side of it with cops. I want to say that no, of course not. Not every cop, not every policeman is bad. We all know that.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. That you have to go through that.
Right, and that is one of the things that I do want to make clear here. No one is saying that. That's not where we're attacking.
No, we're not.
Where we're attacking is the fact that the ones who have been a problem are enabled to be the problem. And so whether they're enabled by your silence of ignoring them, or whether it's you're right with them, has been the issue. When earlier you said, when you were talking about Ahmaud, and you were saying, well, they had this law, and you have this, you can make a citizen's arrest, and there had been this history, and here it is. I want to. Trayvon Martin died from that same law in Florida. Yeah. Like you cannot sit there and keep lumping everybody the same. Just like just now, I made that distinction. The sad part is, if you go back enough, every white person had somebody that owned slaves. But you know what else happened too? There were black people that owned slaves. Yep. So you cannot sit there and go back and say, you know what, because your family owned slaves, this is how you are, and this is how things are. You can't even say that about racism. Just because your father or your mother was racist has no bearing. It has a bearing on you in the fact that, yes, you were in that environment. But at some point, you got out in the world, you started looking at everybody, and you were like, you know what? Because what is racism? Racism is a generalization. And what did they just do? Those guys made a generalization. That's why I refuse to watch the video, because I have seen enough of my people killed. Like I can't watch it anymore because it's ridiculous. You've made a generalization again. Trayvon Martin was a generalization. Eric Gardner was a generalization. Sandra Bland was a generalization. Philando Castile. I remember you said about in 16 Shots, the guy Laquan, I can't remember his name, but
Laquan McDonald.
Laquan McDonald. I want to go back to something that people do not remember, and it happened, if I remember correctly, in 1992 and 1993. I forgot which year, but it happened within a year of each other. Abner Louima was a Haitian immigrant. Abner Louima was sodomized and beaten by the police for nothing. Didn't really understand the language, didn't understand like what was like, going on. And they harassed him, stopped him, and sodomized and brutalized him. Amadou Diallo was an immigrant, and Amadou Diallo, I forgot where he was from. He was from somewhere in Africa. Amadou Diallo was reaching for his wallet, and they shot him 41 times. Trayvon Martin was walking, and because he had on a hoodie and he had on his headphones and he was not paying attention to you, he fit the description. What are we saying? That is my issue with what goes on. We're out here making these generalizations. We're out here saying this is okay. I have the power to do whatever it is. And it goes back to what I'm saying. Racism is really a classism problem. You think you're better than somebody. And right when you think that, that's where the issues go.
Yeah.
And that's what I have. This is where I have the problem with. It's just you think, hey, I have this right and I have this power. Because because there's something else that happens that nobody thinks about. When have you ever heard it reverse? When have you ever heard of a white person going in a black neighborhood and somebody followed them, somebody accosted them, somebody chastised them, and it led to violence and a horrific murder? You don't hear it. Not often. Not often. It's happened. I said, but but on the level, and I would say the frequency that these kinds of things happen to Black and brown people, like you don't hear it like that. And it's because it doesn't happen like that, because Black people, we don't have that same feeling. We do not sit there and think we are better than anybody else. Black people are more inclusive. Like, so we feel like we feel like you said, it's you're one of us. You're hey, I'm gonna reach out, I'm gonna talk to this person, I'm going to be more forgiving, I'm going to do everything possible, because that's how we've been throughout history. We have been forgiving. We do not hold, we never held white people to that standard after slavery. Like, we never sat there and held white people and said, you know what, because of the crimes you have committed against us, because you took us from our home in Africa, because you did this to us, we're going to make it our mission to punish you.
Now, some people have.
Some people have. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
I want to get it, because that one.
Another show. Come on back, bro.
That one bothers me, because I'm just like, you cannot sit there and hold, and you cannot sit there and do that. But the thing is, we haven't done that. We don't make citizens arrests. We that's not a thing we do.
Who really does? Like, truthfully, I would be scared to death to try to stop somebody committing a felony. I mean, think that these men were, in my opinion, let me say that, wrong, because Arbery wasn't committing a felony, and they truly, by all the facts that have laid out, he was ambushed. And so, I mean, watching the video, you can definitely tell. And even in the report, the second DA that recused himself went so far as to blame Arbery for his own death, saying that he probably pulled the trigger himself, like made him pull the trigger. I was appalled. But it's just, I don't even know where the sentence started, truthfully. I started about that letter, but it's, I mean, I don't know, where do you go at this point? Because even a white man, truthfully, like I'm afraid for my children to go out, you know, because people are idiots. And I'm sorry, who really does a citizen's arrest? Now I found out where I was going. See, I looped back. I figured I'd get there.
Well, that's good. That's good.
I was like, if I keep talking, I'll remember what I was saying.
Right.
But, you know, what entitles somebody to do that? And what gives them that, you know, thought process of, hey, there's a black man in my neighborhood. I bet he did something wrong. Let's get him. Like, what? I guess I just don't have that in me. And I search and I try to think, like, what gives them that thought that I have to stop this man? I can't wait the 5 minutes, because by watching the surveillance tape from one of the neighbors, you see the cops get there literally within minutes of the first call. So why couldn't they just wait and let the cops do their job? What made them take it into their own hands? Where's that line? And why do people cross it? I guess that's my question. Like, where is that line, and why do people not, like, why don't people like stop at the line?
I mean, we've seen that throughout history. I mean, you saw it in you saw it in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, it's I remember when you really break down the story of David and Goliath, and you sit there and you say, what would make the Philistines just decide we're just going to run over? Why? They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're, you know, we were able to do this, right? You get a little more recent than that. You say, well, look at the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages had slavery but it was over in Europe, but they had the same thing. They had the feudal system, right? So you have serfs and you have peasants, you have lords, right? The peasants are just ridiculously poor, and they're working under the serfs. So that's indentured servitude. And it's like, well, I can do this because you're poor. I can do this. I have this power over you. I said, why is it? You know, I know people do not want to admit to Columbus. There's some people that don't want to admit to Columbus not finding America. They don't want to admit to Columbus's crimes. But Columbus, like a lot of conquistadors at that time, Columbus decided, okay, well, I can go and I'm gonna sail and I'm going to find America. And oh wait, I end up in the West Indies. Oh man, I can rape the women. I can beat the men. I can pillage. Okay, so you get that. Okay, and then of course you move to slavery. You move to, and it's because classism.
Yeah.
And you feel I can do this. This is okay. But with racism once again started back in the Bible. You're looking, and everything they were doing against the Hebrews was racist. It's the same reason why against your prejudice against Jews. I have a really good Jewish friend, and it's like you'll hear some of the things. I mean, you'll hear some of the stereotypes, and usually you'll hear the stereotypes with Jews. It's they're smart. You'll hear like those, which are good stereotypes to have, to say, all right, well, they're successful, they're careful with money, family oriented, that. But you hear the other part of it, like Jews are responsible for 9/11. Jews are they hoard all the wealth, they do this, they do that. And you're like, well, why is it that this was happening? Why is it that that's able to do? Any darker skinned people, or well, staying with the Jews, you have the Holocaust. Here's Hitler, who is part Jewish, is saying, well, I can do this. I hate myself and I hate what that part about me. So let me be able to do this. And so, you have that. And so then when you combine classism with racism, and then so then it's I can and then like that, I can take over Black and brown people. I can subdue them. I can do this to them. I mean, you look all over the world. You look at one point, Africa is owned by 15 nations, 15, 20 nations. The fact that the British own much of North Africa for the longest. You look at who was it, the Brit it was the English owned this. I can't remember everybody who owned in Africa, but I just remember, Spanish owned this, whoever owns this. And okay, so you have that. You had it in South America, right? At one point in South America, at one point, Mexico was told by Spain everything they had to do, they had to run through Spain. How far is Mexico from Spain? Especially back in those days, and you're telling me
just a small boat ride.
Yeah. you're telling me so Mexicans had to defer to Spanish. I mean, that's how it's worked in the world. It's always been about who can I subdue, who can I put under my rule, who can I put under my thumb, and you do it.
So here's the question, that all of this leads up to, and I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and I've been watching a lot of documentaries lately because I just love them. But the question is, where do we go, and what, as a society, as people in the new, I would say the new society, the up and coming times, how are we to change this? Like, what are we to do? What's our next steps? Because things like this can't continue to happen, and it's to the point that some people think it's okay, and it just gets pushed under the carpet. And it's evident there in Georgia that was going to be the case, and this video released, and all of a sudden people knew about it, and all of a sudden it became important. Right. And I feel like, had that not been released, this might not be to this day an importance to them. So what are we to do as a society? What are our steps that we have to do so that we can groom the next generation where this isn't happening? Because our young men are dying, jogging. My children could go out. I fear for them every time they go out that door, and we're white, but it doesn't matter to me. To the color doesn't really matter, because it seems like society as a whole is kind of going down that path. Like, hey, I'm just going to throw a blanket over it, do it and ask forgiveness later, I guess. But, I can't imagine being the mother of a Black man. Or I cannot imagine that. I mean, it's a fear to me to have my friends and, my better half go out the door, and you fear for them because society. If you get pulled over by a cop, first thing, I mean, you could say one thing wrong. I mean, so you have those cops that are just automatically gonna racial profile you, and just, then you're into another situation, and, your life really is at risk. And so what are we to do? Like, what is our steps that we have to take? Because it seems like we are educating, we are growing, we are, as a society, supposedly evolving to a better realm, but yet we still have this problem. So, I mean, what can we do to change it?
The solution to it is that what has happened in this case, and what you've seen is with Ahmaud Arbery, is that white people have used their privilege. Yeah. That's the only way. Andrea, I'm gonna be honest. It's on y'all. We're limited in what we can do, and that's a biblical. You can, where God says that where there are two or three gathered in my name, you can. It's only so much we can do. We are limited. We are but one race. But whereas you team up, if you've looked and you've had white people on every socioeconomic level, on every monetary level, on just status, power level, whatever, has spoken out against this. I have some friends who are in interracial marriages, and they have said, okay, this is wrong. Let me speak up. And I mean, they have spoken up about all the other stuff that was happening too, but they have this one right here. I am going to run. I am going to run for this man right here because this is what happened. It was Tom Brady the other day wrote
Yeah.
a letter, like
That one shocked me. That one really kind of like threw me because I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, and this is another thing because we'll get into this in the sports one, but the Patriots are viewed as a white team, right? So, and then with like Tom Brady and his affiliation with Trump, it was viewed as if, well, Tom Brady can play with black people, he can play with black men, but at the end of the day, he's not going to protect them. And what I liked about it, because I think Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback to ever play. I said when he came out with this, the thing he was saying was, no, 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 I'm in the fight with you. I understand that I haven't grown up like that, but I understand what is happening, and I have to speak out against wrong.
I think you just hit the nail on the head out of everything. You
Right.
don't have to be in that classification. You don't have to be in that race. You don't have to do anything,
Right.
but you have to understand. You have to open your eyes and see and understand. You cannot live in a bubble. You cannot live in this perfect society. You have to open your eyes, see for yourself. You cannot live off the words of your past. You cannot live off the hope of the future. You literally reality, DeeMaine reality. This is the main reality of life, is that you have to be aware. And I think that's a problem. And I think that really could solve a lot of issues if people really open their eyes and looked at the situation and thought for themselves. I don't think people think for themselves, but that's a whole nother podcast. But I really think you hit the nail on the head right there, is that people have to realize other situation. They really have to open their eyes, look at the situation, and think for themselves. You cannot assume, you cannot classify, you cannot, put baby in a corner. You just can't do it. And I want to say our society should already be there, but I don't think we are. Like you said, we're still just 100 years in.
155 years out, and we some one of the things you can look at and you can say, and being a Christian, one of the things you look at is you're optimistic. I know a lot of people have read Revelation in the Bible, and you read Revelation and you're like, oh my gosh, this is how the world ends. And everybody was with the pandemic and Kobe dying and the flu and hornets, murder hornets, and it was the world is ending. And so when you read Revelation, it's all this stuff, and but we don't know the hour when we're going to be taken. But the thing is, with that is being a Christian, you really reading the Bible and following God is God is a God of love, and everything He's taught. The issue is we've gone against a lot of the things that He says. When God said, He says, above love above all is the most treasured commandment, and so what we do is we don't love, and I said it's because. But the thing about us not loving is that's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
We were all created in his image. So his image is love. And so it has to be taught to you. Racism, classism, sexism, misogyny, which is a whole nother topic. All that's taught to you.
Yeah.
That's not something that was ingrained in you. Nobody comes out the womb and says, I want to subdue somebody of another race. Nobody comes out like that. That is something that is taught.
It is a learned behavior.
It is a learned behavior. And that's where we are in this country. We have to undo learned behaviors. It's the main reason why I go to therapy. You look at your life and you say, well, where did I mess up and what went wrong and why did I do this? And it's like you go to therapy and you look and you go, man, that was a learned behavior. I was in an environment that wasn't so great for me, and this is what I learned. Or man, I was in this relationship and we da 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 da, and this is why I do this. It is learned behavior. This is all learned behavior, which means anything you can learn, you can unlearn. Or I don't believe you unlearn anything. Anything you learn, you reframe what you learned. So yes, you may have learned that it's okay that the Confederate flag is okay. You may have learned that it's okay to put a cross in the yard. You may have learned it's okay to put a noose around a black man's neck. You may have learned all those things. You may learn that it's okay to call somebody the N-word. You may have learned all that. But it's not that you unlearn it. What happens is you start getting in a space in which you have a reframe. And that reframe comes around because you start looking at other people and you start looking at other situations and you say, whoa, this isn't like my environment. You have to think about those guys down there in Georgia. They've been there their whole lives. I don't know them personally, but I'm 95% sure that those guys have not traveled anywhere else and seen anything else and done anything else and been around people, black and brown people, to see, oh, wait a minute, hold on. They can make money. They can be in affluent neighborhoods. It's okay for them to do this. My assumption is you're around a whole bunch of guys, and like I said, I don't know them that well, but I'm pretty much willing to guess. My assumption is they were around a whole bunch of other guys, and they were around a whole bunch of women that's okay. Y'all are making jokes. Y'all are saying this you're saying it in those public places. You're going to the bars, you're going to the restaurants, you're going to the clubs, and then in your own house, you're perpetuating this nonsense. And so, of course, when you get it, basically, he was served up on a platter. He's running through that neighborhood. He was served up on a platter to him. So now all this stuff that you're able to do in your daily life, you can come out and do now. And so you do it. And the thing is, if you look at it, it's only because after 2 months, there's been a stink about it.
Yeah.
So, which means it hasn't been a problem. And that's not a problem where you are. And that lets you know it's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I pray that, as a Christian, I pray that good comes out of this. But, as a realistic person, I look at the things of the past and, I have to be, cautious to what is going to happen. If they don't go through with the charges, if they're not found guilty, what kind of uprest is that going to bring in that community? Because I think back to the Trayvon Martin, I think back to the Rodney King, like when things didn't come out as they should, truthfully,
right.
And then there's uprest in the community. So, I think that we've hit a lot of nails that people don't really think about all the time. And it opens a lot of doors to start thinking. It also opens a lot of doors to start talking to your friends, to your neighbors, to your children, to your family. A lot of people are home with the COVID right now, lockdown, and it gives you ample time to touch base on topics like this. These are topics that aren't always talked about, and some people are afraid to talk about them. And you know, I personally appreciate you coming on tonight so that you and I could talk about this, because I've never shied away from a topic, taboo or not. Like, I'm just going to go with it. But I do appreciate you coming on, and you know, I'd love to have you back so that we can touch on some other topics. But you know, I just really hope that this event is one of the last that we have to visit like this, even though realistically in my mind, I know that's probably not feasible right now, but I hope that we are moving towards that in our society.
I think that this was the first time since 9/11, at least in my lifetime, my first time since 9/11, I can remember us all being together on the topic. And I'm talking about Black, brown, white, Asian. This is the first time I can remember since then that us saying and agreeing this is wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel more hopeful in a sense that because there have been white people to use their privilege to combat prejudice and racism, I do think that that's a big step in the right direction. I think that's going to be, but that has to continue to, that has to, it has to be the norm. And it can't just be for Ahmaud Arbery. You know, we have to do it about prison reform.
Yeah.
You know, we have to do it about predatory lending. We have to do it about Social Security, and we have to do it. We have to do it in all these arenas, you know, that affect Black and brown people. You know, in order for that to happen, you know, and that's what it has to be the norm.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about it here. You know, and of course, this will be for another day. But like, you know, with Toya Brown, like her whole situation where she killed her accuser. I mean, she killed her. She killed her her rapist. You know, she murdered her rapist, and she ends up serving a prison time. And you know, and so you have, you know, and so it's like prison reform needs to be talked about. I wrote, if everybody checks out Cavic Sense, I wrote an article, and it was about, you know, how as Black men, how do we move forward? And I, you know, I spoke about that. I spoke about, well, the fact is, I was like, we are something like 62% or something like that. I forgot what it was. I researched and found, but it was something like 62%. And that 62%, it was ridiculous. It was like, we're 62% of the prison population. And you start looking and you're like, what? That's ridiculous. And so it's like, no. And why are you held in there? Well, a lot of Black men are held in because of high bail, excessive bail, and then you can't. You don't have enough money to afford the lawyer, and you know you don't have enough to get a court date and all this other stuff. And you start looking at it, and you're like, that is crazy. And you know, and so it's up to at this point. It's like, look, there's only so much we can do as Black people, but it's up to white people to use the privilege to say, look, hey, I don't know what you go through. I'm not very sure of what goes in the inner city. I have no idea. You know, I don't live like that. I don't know. But at the same time, I'm going to fight for you, because the one thing you learn as a Christian is that you fight for those that can't fight for themselves. And in some cases, as Black people, we cannot fight for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like we can do all we can. We can be better about things, but at the same time, it's like any race. You have your limitations. And so it's like, what can you do when you can't fight for yourself in a situation? Well, you need help, you know, to go that extra mile.
Exactly. Junius, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I hope that you will come back and visit us here at DeeMaine Reality. If you'd like
Anytime,
to check
anytime.
him out, you can find him. I will link him on my Facebook page. Definitely a great guy to follow. Always got some good insights on, current events, sports. We're definitely going to have him back and talk sports. Um, I appreciate you coming here. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Follow me here on YouTube. We're going to grow this platform so that, I can have more guests on so we can talk about more topics. We talk about anything from life to crafts to couponing to whatever floats my boat at that day. Who knows? But definitely, I appreciate you coming on. I want to leave you this one challenge for this week. Open your eyes. Just look around you, be aware of your situation that you're in. Don't be closed off to the box that you've grown up in. Open your eyes and be aware. If there's one thing that you do this week, just open your eyes. Thank you guys for hanging out tonight, and we'll see you next time.
I appreciate it.
Bye, Junior.
Bye.